In this video, we're going to answer the questions that you sent in, but we got snow last night and we haven't had much snow in over a month, and so we're going to go skiing first.
If it weren't for skiing, I'd have a hard time living in snow country. We already have breaks in the clouds, so I need to clear off the solar panels before we head out and ski.
Welcome to Clarity Off Grid. We're Matt and Christina, and we love traveling in our van with our dogs, Jessie and Lily Bell, exploring breathtaking places and meeting kind and generous people. When we're not traveling, we're savoring our off-grid lifestyle in our sustainable home in the spectacular Colorado mountains. If you like this video and want to help support our channel, you can send us some love by clicking the heart below this video. So our first question is, when you consider access to services like police, hospital, library, fire department, organic, produce, raw, dairy, etc., how do these services equate into your decision to build sustainably in a more remote area? Well, that's a really awesome question, and we're going to answer that in a little bit. So the real truth is, even though it looks like from our house that we live in the middle of nowhere, we're really only about 10 minutes from a decent sized town. And so we have access to all the resources that we need. We have a great natural food store, we have regular food stores, we have great restaurants, and all the services we need.
This is a mountain town. Many of the supplies do come over Wolf Creek Pass, and during big snowstorms we can often get some delays. So sometimes we have a little bit thin shelves, but almost never.
As far as services go, like fire and police, we're close enough to town that we have access to all of those services as well. Like the ambulance could get up to our house, and the fire truck and the police if we ever needed them. We're only 10 minutes, like I said, from town. One of the biggest considerations we had was about fire. So we don't want to count on a fire truck getting to our house if there were a wildfire. So we chose to build the house such that it is pretty fire resistant.
We'll talk more about that later.
That was fun. Hey, I just want to I'm so excited. I just want to wrap up a little bit more about that last question, and that all those questions, all those things we talked about are such good points. If you're interested in building off-grid or sustainably, you want to make sure you answer all those questions before you buy a piece of property.
It's really coming down. We're loving this.
The next question really ties in with the previous question, and it is, though we can use internet for remaining connected to others, what did you consider when having or not having access to face-to-face friendships and family connections? Well, to answer that is, we're really not that remote, and we do have family connections right next door. I built on a piece of property that's right next to my parents, so we can have that relationship. And my parents are aging, so we're here, and I feel like we're able to help them stay in their home longer because we're here to help them. In addition to that, my son lives on the property so that when we're traveling, he can keep an eye on the house and take care of our kitty Ivy. And again, because we're so close to town, we can go in and meet with friends, we can have dinner, we can socialize, people can come up here. Even though we're off grid and in a sustainable home, we're not socially isolated. What consideration have you planned for aging in place in your current sustainable home? Well, that's also a really great question. When I designed this house, I was in my early 40s, and even in my early 40s, I really didn't want to have to scale a big tall ladder to clean my windows. So I made sure that all the windows were accessible without any kind of ladder, even a step ladder. I can wash all of the windows in the house. The other consideration that was really important to me when I designed the house was I did not want to have to get up on a steep roof to clean the gutters or to do any kind of maintenance or anything like that. In this house, I can easily access the roof with just a little step ladder. So can Jessie. And once I'm up here, the roof is relatively flat, so I can walk around the entire roof. I can get over to the edge and clean out the gutters. I can get to the solar panels and brush those off if that's necessary. And I can wash and clean all the skylights on the roof without being in any danger.
When you're thinking about aging in place, it's a consideration to be thinking about perhaps you might need a wheelchair or a walker or something like that. And this house was designed so that there are no thresholds and getting into the entrance is very easy. We've got these nice pavers here. There is one tiny step right here that's about 4 inches high. It would be easy to... Hi, Lily. It would be easy to put a ramp here so that if you needed wheelchair access. And then as you can see, under the thresholds, it's just straight across. You could roll right through. There's not even a bump across there. And that's the same on the interior door. Smart design. About 4 years ago, I had both my hips replaced, and they were about 3 months apart. And in both of those circumstances, I was able to run my walker in here that I needed for just a few days, and using my crutches was no problem. This open floor plan is all on one level, and it's just, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better situation for aging in place. Even outside, the entire length of this patio is all on one level, so you could get from inside to outside with no problem. Next question. In the event where one or both of you need help with the daily chores of life or personal care, what is in the plan for housing such individuals to meet those needs? Would they live in a separate RV on site, or do you have an ADU for such a purpose? So first of all, this room here is really our flex room. Right now we use this as our offices. We have 2 complete office setups in here. But this room could easily be cordoned off and used as a spare bedroom. We also have a loft up here that has a full-size bed in it right now and could be used for a caregiver. And then our third way of handling that is we also have a spare room that is built into one of the bays in the garage. And so we have plenty of space if we need to have housing for someone else to be here.
So the next question is, what hobbies do each one of you pursue? So that's a fun question. So,
as you can see, skiing.
Exactly. And in the summer, hiking.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And pre-pandemic, I used to dance a lot. I danced for fitness in a class, and then I helped my friend who teaches a social dance class at the college. And then we dance together, or did.
We like dancing. Mm-hmm. We haven't been dancing nearly enough.
I know. Lots of things have changed in the last couple of years.
We do some mountain biking too.
Yeah. I'm not a very good mountain biker. In fact, I'm a really bad mountain biker, but I love to road bike ride, and I've been riding since I was in my 20s. I like to knit, and I've been knitting Matt a sweater for well over a year now because we keep traveling in really hot climates and it's too hot to knit a big wool sweater. But it's getting there.
Next question. Describe your backup systems for refrigeration, heating, lighting, water, and transportation. Okay, well, let's start with refrigeration. We have a 24-volt DC refrigerator. So even if our batteries get down to 22 volts, which is how low they have to get before the inverter turns off the AC to the house, we will still have refrigeration. If we get down below 20 volts, the refrigerator will still keep things cold, but it might not be quite as cold. That brings us to the lighting question also. Because we have an inverter for our 110 volt lighting and other power requirements that require 110 volts, after about 10 days of no sun, we may lose our AC power, which just means that when the batteries get below 22 volts, the inverter shuts off and we lose our 120 volts to the house. That is no big deal in this house. The only thing we lose are some lights. We can't turn on our entertainment center, and we have to light the stove with a match. No big deal. Gives us an opportunity to snuggle up in front of the fire and to use candles. And we also have some backup battery-operated lanterns.
As far as the heating system goes, this house heats and cools itself with the sun, and I'm standing in a wonderful winter sun puddle right now. Now, if we have several cloudy days, we do have a backup wood stove, and we use that if we have a storm. Sometimes it's nice just to bring the temperature up in the morning or in the evening, but we do not rely on the wood stove for our safety. This house can never freeze, and it will never get below 55 degrees.
All of our domestic water comes from the rain and snow that we catch on the roof. It runs into gutters and gets stored in cisterns. We do only get around 12 inches of rain per year here. So at certain times of the year, it's a real concern for us to conserve water. In really dry years, sometimes we have to order water from a water delivery truck, and they just drive it up here and pump it into our cisterns. We don't really consider backup transportation to be an issue. We each have a four-wheel drive vehicle in addition to our van, and everyone who lives in this area pretty much has a four-wheel drive vehicle. So if we need somebody to come up, bring us something, whatever, transportation I don't think is going to be an issue.
The next question is, the cost for building, land included, and the energy systems, water systems, etc. could be quite high depending upon the terrain and other aspects of your location. As a newbie considering a life like you two have, would you please break down the cost per system? Well, I have to admit, this is a pretty challenging question, and I get it a lot. And it's not that I wouldn't share with you what I spent to build this house. The thing is it just wouldn't be very helpful to you. I built this house in 2010 when the cost of building materials was extremely low compared to what it is now, and all the other costs have gone up. But I will share with you that one misconception is that by adding these systems that I have to a house can increase the cost of building a home. And in my case, it actually reduced the cost of building the home. And I want to give you some examples. For instance, I chose to design this house so that it heats and cools with the sun. Therefore, we have no mechanical system. A mechanical heating and cooling system is a very expensive part of building a home, and we didn't need to include that. The other system that we have is that we collect all of our water on the roof, and that saved me from having to drill a very expensive well. And particularly in this location, it's very difficult to drill a well that brings in water that you can drink. And it's also very expensive. So that reduced that expense. The other systems that we have is that we have a gray water planter, which is just inherent into the house. The system is designed into the design of the house, and we use a composting toilet. By using those two things, I eliminated the need for a very expensive septic system. I designed the house to use very little electricity, especially compared to what you might consider a conventional home. And what that allowed me to do was to have a very small solar array. We only need a 1.2 kilowatt solar array. So along with the solar panels and the battery backup and the systems for our solar system was still far cheaper than what it would have cost me to just tie into the electrical grid. And I don't have any monthly electric bills. Our next question is, I just love your dogs. Is it your experience that having dogs living in a more isolated life is not just a pleasure but a necessity? Well, of course the dogs are a necessity. We love our dogs, and their companionship is really important to us. There's kind of pros and cons of having dogs up here. The pro is that we do have bears and mountain lions and coyotes, and the dogs do keep those animals from getting too close to the house. The bad news about that is they do keep the wildlife away, so we often miss seeing the deer and the fox and some things like that. Overall, we really appreciate having the dogs. So the very last question for the day is, I would like to see more of the black cat in your videos. What's her story? I'd like to hear your 2 dog stories too. Well, Ivy does not travel with us, so she doesn't make it into a lot of our videos. But this is Ivy. She's a little black kitty, and she's a Manx, so she has no tail. And Ivy came to live with us a couple years after we moved into Twisted Oak, and she was teeny tiny. And when I finally read her paperwork, I realized that she had been very, very sick, and we had got her from the Humane Society. And she just has so much spunk, and she has turned out to be the most lovey kitty. The first night that we had her, I was so afraid that she couldn't get down or get to the litter box because she was so tiny that I just tucked her in bed with me in my arm. And to this day, that's where she likes to sleep.
About 4 years ago, we got Jessie. Christina's son, Andy, really wanted to have a dog. And we went back and forth and finally decided we'd go looking. We went to the Humane Society, and Jessie was 14 weeks old, was sitting there in the back of this little kennel, and we just fell in love with him. Lily is 13 years old. When we brought Jessie home, that just changed her life. She started playing again. It must have added 5 years to her life. She was acting like a 5-year younger dog. On top of that, Jessie motivated us to do some research into food, and we ended up buying some much better quality food than we had been feeding Lily. And feeding Lily that food made such a difference. She changed from acting like a 9-year-old, 10-year-old dog to a 5-year-old dog. She had so much energy, started hiking with us again. It was a major change. Yeah, I guess we like the dogs.
Yeah. Aww. Okay. Well, thank you once again for joining us on this video. We appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for submitting questions. You know who you are. So if you are interested in more information on sustainable building or sustainable homes like ours, There is a ton of information in the description below this video. I will leave links to other videos we've made that go into much more detail about the systems we have in the house. And as well, I have a book, and I'll put that link in the description, and I have an online course that is called Designing Your Sustainable Home 101. And if you're interested in that, I'll put the link in the description down below. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.